You know, if you look at our struggle since we've been here, in the early 1900s, I guess from a period to maybe 1900 to 1925, the talented tenth philosophy among blacks seemed to be working. And I think it worked in conjunction with the system that we were under. And when I say that, I'm saying this. We were living in a racist society which marginalized our people and forced our people to live among one another. So when you had black doctors, black lawyers, black professionals, black artisans, they lived among the community, and by and large, or as a byproduct of that, the community started to rise. And you had the Black Wall Streets, you had the Rosewoods, you had the Wilmington, North Carolinas, you had them all over the country.
All over the country.
Now, if you look at the other side of the coin, you had a white society that was either rich or poor, and most whites were poor and lived in the cities. So, being that they didn't have the job opportunities, they started doing what you see that they point the finger at our people now. They started bootlegging, selling dope, killing one another, Chicago, New York, gangsters, firing guns all in the street, murder capitals of the world. After the market fell in the 30s, and they come up with this New Deal and all these WPA to put white folks in a position to develop what is considered now as the middle class. At the times we were talking about, there were no middle class. So we see that the talented tenth worked when our people had a mindset to work with one another. I think they ramped up the strategy that you're talking about after or during the time of Roosevelt and moving forward, and the development of that white middle class. They ramped up this strategy of self-hate to counter that talented tenth. What's your feelings on that?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I spoke, all of that's in the book.
Okay.
All of that right there is in the book. Because we were forced to live together, the talented tenth lived with the 90%, and we had Black Wall Streets all over the country. So we got a lot of people talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma, but you named a few others. I mean, there were these thriving towns all over the country. Our towns were better than all the Caucasian towns.
Yes.
And so when we see in Red Summer in 1921, when they began to burn our towns down, so there's a collusion between the government and the poor Caucasians to destroy our towns. But now, see, this is the thing why we got to get on top of our education, which is one of the parts of the system of self-hate. So people are just finding out about the Black Wall Street, and most people still don't know that, all right, after those towns were burned down, we rebuilt more towns. Because, again, the talented tenth being with the 90%, it's no way to prevent the people from building up, because the talented tenth is going to do everything to help everybody else when they're forced to.
Okay.
So we built those towns back up from the 1920s up into the 1950s until we had integration. And I always let people understand integration had nothing to do with Caucasians' moral epiphany. They didn't just all of a sudden become good people and say, well, I think it's time that we should want to live with them. Integration was all about them being able to infiltrate our communities that we had that were thriving. So we had integration started in 1954, and then in 1956, the Highway Act was passed. So now they're building these new highways, and literally, I mean, this always sounds like a boogeyman ghost story, but it's true. In 1956, when they passed this Highway Act, they literally built highways through every single black business district. They eminent domained every black business district all the way up until 1997. They eminent domained the business district in Miami. The last one that they took. They literally eminent domained our business districts. And then they built highways through. It correlates with integration. And then they begin to lure the best of us away. Well, you can come live with us now since we're integrated, or you can come work with us now after they destroyed their businesses. So now they gotta choose now. I gotta relocate my business because they destroyed the black district. So where am I going to relocate to now? I can't put it anywhere. So now they're luring us to come in certain areas, and that's when they physically separated the talented 10th from the 90% after integration and this Highway Act. That's when they physically separated us, but then they began to mentally separate us after that.
You know, it's kind of ironic that you mentioned that, because I was listening to a terrestrial radio program on Friday, and it was out of Richmond, Virginia, and the older gentleman was saying that during that period that you're talking about, that they built I-95 straight through a black commercial district in Richmond and basically tore it apart. So it's kind of ironic that you said that, because I heard that being stated by an older gentleman 2 days ago.
It's real. In Kinloch, Missouri, in 1981, they took the area in Kinloch, Missouri, and built the Lambert Airport. The freeways, all the freeways that you see in LA, they got like 5, 7 different freeways. All of those freeways represent a black business district that's gone.
Can you lay out the the chapters to your book?
Yeah. So as soon as we start, you want me to just name them or
name?
Or
yes, yeah, just.
Okay. Well,
name.
the first thing we're doing is identifying the system. After we go into identifying the system, we deal with the 5 parts, the 5 working parts of the system of hate: economics, education, entertainment, etiquette, and then news. And then after we go through those, we deal with the psychological buy-in of how they get people to buy into being against their own best self-interest. So with our entertainers, they use brand protection. They tell you you're protecting your brand. With our corporate people, they use professionalism. So professionalism is never going to include anything black. And then with the everyday person, they use reverse racism. So if we talk about building our own black town, they convince some of our people that doing that is racist, or being black first, or supporting black businesses is racist. So those are the chapters and the different little breakdowns. And
the other thing that comes to me, I'd like you to develop in order to set the context of, as I see also the conversation is, and I heard you do it, but the question about system. How do you define a system, and how do you define this system actually doing this? You gave a lot of examples that's in your book about the outcomes that are given, but as it being a system, how did you come to recognize it as a system, and what makes it a system?
Okay, well, a system is a well-organized and purposeful structure with members, entities, factors, and parts that simultaneously influence each other in order to maintain their existence, the existence of the system, in order to maintain the goal of the system. So that's just what a system is, definition-wise, per collegiate Webster's Dictionary. Now, how did I come to see it as a system? I was just looking at it, when I just begin to look at history and seeing things done over and over and over again, seeing things being intentional. So when we start with the economics, that's where we start at. So like I said, we had our own towns. They burned our towns down. They thought that was going to work. So now after they burned the towns down, we rebuilt the towns again. So it's like, damn, well, if we burn their towns down, all they're going to do is rebuild these towns. And as I said, they believed in the talented tip theory. So now either we burn these towns down and they continue to build them up and eventually build a military to overtake us, or we find a way to take this talented tip apart. So this way we don't have to burn them down, but we can get them out of the neighborhood so they won't build them up. So economically, they destroyed our business districts. They used integration to lure our people, our talented tip into their neighborhoods. And once they did that, we move into the educational system. So now, after Brown versus Board of Education, which, oh my God, it's just, as Malcolm said, only a fool will send their children to be educated by their enemies. And so with this education system, They wiped out black accomplishments. I mean, it's a travesty that I just found out about Reverend Leon, and I'm from Philly, to find out about Reverend Leon Sullivan just a few years ago and everything that he did. I'm so ashamed, and I'm okay with being transparent about my ignorance. One day, I caught the train to go to Cecil B. Moore Avenue to go down to the UNIA, and it's a couple of years ago. And when I got off the train, because I had never got on the train down there before, I saw this big picture of this black man, and next to the black man was the name Cecil B. Moore, and I had no idea Cecil B. Moore was black, who he was, or what he did. Now, I knew the street my entire life. I'm about 33 years old when this happened. And so I'm trying to figure out, well, how come I never learned this? Why is the Philadelphia school system not teaching these great accomplishments of these men who have streets named after them? So I'm looking at this education system, and the system is being used to do three things. It's used, one, because majority of the teachers are middle-aged white women. So it's used to give the impression that white people hold the keys to all the proper information. So we have people who, if a Dr. Francis Cress Welsing or a Neely Fuller or Amos Wilson, John Henry Clark, if we hear any information from them that contradicts what we heard from Caucasians, we'll side with the Caucasians before we side with our own black psychologists, because the education system trained us to do that. It also, when you read the quote that's in the education section, it comes from Carter G. Woodson, when he says that the same educational system that inspires the oppressor by making him believe he created everything worthwhile sparks and crushes the genius of the black child by making him feel his people have never done anything that have amounted to anything, and they will never be on the level of other races. A Negro thus educated is a hopeless liability to his race. So Carter G. Woodson, in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, lays out how the educational system is used to make us still inferior. Because now they'll teach us about explorers. First of all, they always phrase things to make it sound better. And my daughter almost got in trouble a little bit in school because I don't allow her to call, pilgrims, explorers, or anything. She has to call them terrorists because that's what they are. So whenever they talk about it at school, she says, no, can you please call them terrorists because those people are terrorists. They came to a country and killed people. They're terrorists. So they teach these explorers. They'll teach Leopold, but they won't teach that Leopold killed millions and millions of Africans. They'll teach Cecil Rhodes, and even black people want to get a Rhodes scholarship, but they won't teach that he went in South Africa and killed millions and millions of Africans. Now, they'll teach us that Hitler killed Jews, and they want us to hate Hitler, but they won't teach us about any of these other Caucasians who harm black people. So this education system will esteem and venerate the Caucasian all over the world, but they will never teach any of the accomplishments of African people all across the world when we've done everything. I mean, it almost sounds like you just want to be a black supremacist by saying we created everything, but it's just the truth. It's just a factual thing, but they don't teach it. And so the school system does that. Then the third thing the school system does is, in the black neighborhoods, is it undereducates us. So the most that we can do is work for them. So when I'm just looking at what it does over and over and over again, because it's one thing if something happens one time, but when something repetitively happens, that's a system. That is something that somebody is intentionally doing. So something that's happened over and over again in different ways. It's like the movie 13th, how he showed us that, there was no prison system prior to the ending of slavery. And once slavery was over, all of a sudden, they built jails, and we dominated the jails immediately. They locked us up for all kinds of different things. And so as I looked at what was happening, the frequency of how it was happening, I was able to see that this is not just happenstance. This is intentional, and this here is a system. So in 1903, W.B. Du Bois published an article titled "The Talented Tenth," and in it he described how, and it wasn't just about Africans who were here in America. It's about just races in general. And his philosophy was that with any race, it's going to be about 10% of that race who are going to be I hate it, because sometimes people want to feel like it makes it sound these people are better, because it's not that you're better. Everybody just has different roles. But it's going to be 10% of the people who are a little more genius, who are going to be a little bit more wealthy, who are going to be a little bit more prominent, who are going to be a little bit more educated. It's just going to be some people who are just going to be at what would appear to be a higher level. Now, I don't
naturally gifted, so to speak.
Yeah, just naturally gifted, people. Like when you go to school, everybody's not going to be super smart.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a percentage of people who are, and but I always want to emphasize that does not mean that people who aren't, that smart on that kind of level are any less than. Everybody just has different roles.
Mm-hmm.
So what W.B. Du Bois believed was that it was that talented 10th's duty that since they were somewhat exceptional, that they were to use their exceptionalism in order to raise up the rest of their people. So it wasn't about him just saying, it's 10% of us that are better than the rest of you guys. No, it was saying, all right, I recognize that some of us have a skill set that's a little bit different. We have a little more prominence. We have a little more power. We have a little more wealth. Well, we need to come together to lift up the rest of our people. So that's what the concept of the talented 10th was about. It's, identifying who these people were and getting those people to uplift the rest of the race. And this is where we struggle at, and this is why the system of self-hate was created. So now you ask the question, did other people believe in the talented 10th? Hell yes. John D. Rockefeller was one of the champions for it. He fully believed in it. And most of the prominent Caucasians believed in it, which is why they created this system of self-hate. This is the whole purpose of this self-hate. If I can indoctrinate every black person with this inferiority complex, with a white superiority complex, if I can indoctrinate all of them with feeling that something about their people is wrong and that they need to assimilate and integrate into white culture, I can keep that talented 10th from ever wanting to help the 90% of their people, because they're going to be focused on being a part of us. So now through that system of self-hate, that's what the goal is. Because a system has to have a goal. And the goal of the system of self-hate is, how do I forget the guy? I got so much going on in my mind right now, is to separate the black talented 10th from the rest of their race in order to assure that they won't help the other 90% raise up. That's what this whole system is about. Now, those who are in the 90%, the self-hate that they experience is just a byproduct of what the real goal is. Because if they can continue to keep our wealthiest people, like when they were trying to get Michael Jordan to speak out about something that was going on in North Carolina, and his response was, well, Republicans wear sneakers too. If they can keep our billionaires from wanting to help the other 90%, then hey, we'll never rise up, because who's going to help us? They're not going to help us. And so that's what the system is about. So W.B. Du Bois coined it. The Caucasians believed in it wholeheartedly, and they believed in it so much that they had to create something in order to counter it, because they know if that talented 10th stays connected with the 90%, it's no way to stop us from rising up. My position with Du Bois is I wholeheartedly believe in the talented 10th, but I'm not a fan of anything else that W.B. Du Bois believed up until the end of his life. I am a Garveyite, right. And you said him being against Garvey, him and the preachers and the whole Garvey Must Go campaign is probably the worst thing ever. Right. So I believe the concept of the 10%, because that's something that I feel like I can't refute, because I can see that it's a small percentage of us, of every race that, operates at a different level. But as far as him, really wanting us to integrate, sort of kind of, wanting us to have just European education, and all of these different things, and not wanting to be self-reliant. When Garvey hit the scene, he wanted us to be self-reliant. Father Noble Drew Ali wanted us to be self-reliant, and W.B. Du Bois didn't. So outside of the concept of the talented 10th, I am not a fan of Du Bois at all. And in his later writings, because he ended up being exiled. He finished his life in Africa. He looked back and regretted some of the things that he did. Mm-hmm. But he was a product of the education that he received. That's what this system does. it sneaks up on you so subtly that you don't even realize you're working against your own best self-interest because it's packaged so well. It's packaged so well through the education that you just think, oh, yeah, this is good, and you don't even dig that you're going against your own people. That's why this system is so effective.